Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission and ask for roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except Commissioner Groniga.
Great, thank you. And next we'll move on to the approval of our July 13 minutes. Any comments or corrections on those? So those are going to go ahead and stand as printed. And next we're going to move on to public comments, which is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on matters of interest to the commission that are not listed tonight as a public hearing. I do have a couple of cards on these. I'll call your name when you come down. If you would repeat your name for the record, you have 3 minutes, and I'm a strict timekeeper, so watch the little light bar that begins with green, and as you get closer to the 3-minute time limit, it'll go to red, and then a buzzer will go off. So first for public comments is Dr. David Paul.
Hi, Commission members. Thank you for letting me come and talk to you today. My overall agenda is to let you know what's going on in the community a little bit. I've given you a handout. I'll be kind of going through that. The regional center, North Bay Regional Center, located in Napa, has not been good neighbors to us. In their disclosures to us, they've decided they weren't going to tell the truth in a number of cases about who is going into the location at 5679 Queen Anne, which is right next to our house. And we just moved in March, although my wife's family, the McGregors, like the McDonalds, have been here since the late 1880s doing service for the city of Santa Rosa. So this North Bay Regional Center has recently acquired this house and this lot, and they want to transfer people from Sonoma Development Center that have, we understand, co-occurring disabilities. They've had behavioral issues. They've not been able to make it in the community up to this time, and they have both a mental and a physical or developmental disability. That's the nature of the people who are being transferred in. Second major item is that they paid $1,125,000 for this Ritz-Carlton-like lovely home on the corner, a home we couldn't afford, and we thought was too dangerous for our grandchildren to be coming in and out of. So we were perplexed that an institution charged with the care of developmentally disabled people would even consider it, but consider it they did, and overpay they did. Your taxpayer money funded the $600,000 down payment and subsidized the $500,000 secondary note at very favorable rates, I might add. And because of their 501c3 status, it appears to me that Santa Rosa doesn't want to even tax the $700,000 a year of income that house generates, nor do they want to put their hands on the $280,000, check it out, $280,000 of free cash that this supposedly residential, supposedly nonprofit activity generates. It's quite astonishing. The Department of Developmental Services has agreed to investigate both the financial and the business process irregularities. Kudos to Nancy Barkman and them. We ask you to deny construction and permitting until those investigations are complete. Thank you.
Dr. Paul, thanks so much for putting your concerns in writing. And
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and refer you back to staff. And my understanding is that you will be receiving some written responses to those concerns, and we will also, so we know how each of those would be addressed by staff. But you should go ahead and contact staff directly also.
Thank you very much. We are very grateful for the research the staff at the Planning Commission has already done.
Okay, great.
This. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next for public comments is Scott Chapman.
Thank you very much. My name is Scott Chapman, and I'm here today to speak to you in protest of the proposed Verizon cell tower at 510 Lewis Road. Law allows for the installation of cell towers on commercial property as long as the facility is not within 75 feet of a residential structure. The placement of this tower does not meet the intent or the spirit of the law, which is to protect residential areas. The tower will be built within 15 feet of a residential zone. Also, due to mandatory setbacks from residential buildings, the placement of the tower will impact the legal building envelopes of multiple properties and simultaneously reduce property values and infringe on property rights. Aesthetically, this is a huge eyesore, 7 stories tall. It will be the tallest structure by 4 stories for blocks around. Our community dates back to the 40s and beyond, and it's an established neighborhood, a place people want to live where their kids can play in the streets and be comfortable around their neighbors. The installation of this tower will drastically change the feeling of the community. It will industrialize it. Surveys of realtors speak to the fact that property values drop between 20 and 30% when a cell tower is built nearby. A 2014 survey by the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy found that when 1,000 people were asked, 79% said they would never purchase or rent property within a few blocks of a cell tower. 94% of these same people said that cell towers in a neighborhood would greatly impact their interest in a property and the price they'd be willing to pay for it. Our neighbors closest to the property have already taken a hit to their property values with the building of a firehouse, and our neighborhood cannot afford more damage to property values. Verizon chose only to notify homeowners within a 400-foot radius, roughly 1 block, which equates to less than 30 homes. The firefighters working and sleeping within 80 feet of the proposed tower were not informed at all. The city will only hear the concerns of property owners, silencing renters in the area, which includes 3 apartment buildings. If the tower is approved, anyone in the neighborhood who wishes to sell their home will have to disclose the tower in their selling documents. The nearby apartments will have to disclose the tower on rental contracts, and tenants will need to sign a release of liability regarding the tower. We are asking the City of Santa Rosa to deny Verizon's application and to allow Verizon to continue their search for a more suitable location that will limit the impact on families. I would ask you specifically to consider where essentially in your backyard. And I'd like to invite any of you to my home, which is just off of Slater Street, to come and stand in my backyard and imagine a 7-story tower right behind the back fence and see how it will impact the use of our property day to day for myself, my wife, and our 2 young sons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Next is Elizabeth Ridlington.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Ridlington. I'm also here to speak about the proposed Verizon cell tower on Steel Lane. I live a couple doors down from Scott, and I'm concerned about the cell tower for a couple reasons. One, I think it's just going to flat out be ugly. In an attempt to reassure myself that I was fretting unnecessarily, I went online and I found a variety of photos of cell phone towers disguised as trees. And some of them were tolerable, and some of them were absolutely hideous. It's actually mildly entertaining to see the different attempts to make them blend into local fauna and flora and see what looks right. You can find them under the hashtag #CellTowerTree. And I also found a nice compilation of photos on the Atlas Obscura website. It was just sort of a crowdsourced set of photos that people had noticed of these cell phone towers as trees. This is not what I want to see from my bedroom window. It's not what I want to see from my office window. And since I work from home, I look out that office window a lot. The second reason I'm concerned about this is I'm worried about property values. I think the perception that a cell phone tower decreases property values may become a self-reinforcing prophecy, because if I'm a prospective buyer coming to look at a house at least in this Santa Rosa housing market, I sort of think about, well, what's my competition? Are there 10 people who are likely to bid, or is it going to be 3 people or 2 people? And if I think fewer people are bidding, then I don't bid as aggressively on a house. I potentially put in a lower offer, thinking that that will be enough to get me the property. So I'm concerned that whatever the data say in the aggregate, this will have an impact on some homeowners when they go to sell, because for any individual property, withdrawing a handful of potential buyers from that pool potentially decreases the price. And then my third concern is that it's out of keeping with the neighborhood. I live in the junior college neighborhood, and my husband and I chose to live there with our son because we like the mixed-use zoning. We like that it's a mix of residential and commercial uses. But this proposed cell phone tower at 7 stories tall feels much more like an industrial use than a commercial use. It also feels like a use that wouldn't be acceptable if it were a 7-story apartment building or a 7-story office building that would be going up just basically over the neighbor's lot line. So those are my 3 concerns about this proposed tower, and I hope that when it comes before you for a vote, you will oppose it and tell Verizon to keep looking for a better location. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I would also refer Mr. Chapman and Ms. Ridlington back to staff so that you can keep apprised of the status of that application as it's moving along. So, okay, thanks. Anyone else want to address us on public comments, which is, again, items that are not on the agenda tonight? Okay. Okay. So I'm not seeing anyone else come down for public comments, and I'm going to go ahead and close public comments. Move on to Planning Commissioner's report. Any reports from our Planning Commission? I just wanted to mention that we did have a Waterways Committee item come in front of the Waterways Committee. It's a tentative map close to a creek. It will be coming in front of the Planning Commission. And one of the things that was very frustrating for the committee members was locating and being able to actually access that property. So I asked Ms. Nicholson, at the point that it does come forward to us, that we have the opportunity, as we have in other these types of projects, to be able to do like a field trip together before the item and go out and actually walk the property together so that we can have access to that. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Okay, next, department reports.
Yes, looking forward to our upcoming meetings. We have a meeting planned for August 24th. We have a couple of items secured for that meeting. They are annexation pre-zoning items, and those packets are getting developed right now. And then further in the future, to plan ahead, we are looking at September 14th for our public hearing on the draft environmental impact report for the Southeast Greenway project. So again, that's still in the works. I believe the notices haven't been sent out for that, so that's just heads up to you in terms of your calendars. And then looking even further, the comprehensive cannabis ordinance, we're targeting September 28th at this point for that ordinance. So we are, with regards to that, we're still undergoing public outreach. We're meeting every other day. We're meeting with a new group to discuss that ordinance and really trying to get a broad base of public comments before collected for you so that you can include that in your review of the ordinance. And then also with the City Council, a couple items that relate to commission actions at past meetings. Next week, the City Council will be looking at a rezoning for Park Lane 2 apartments. That's the project site that was in the Courtside Village area. And then September 5th, there has been an appeal made on the AC Hotel, the off-site parking conditional use permit that the commission approved, and that is scheduled for appeal on September 5th, and I believe Chair Cisco will represent the commission at that meeting. Also that night, the City Council will be looking at the rezoning for the Farmers Lane senior housing. So I think that concludes my report.
Okay. Ms. Farmer, do you have any idea when we will get the hard copies of the EIR in advance of that hearing?
Yeah, so
Like how
we
much
are-
time are we going to have?
Yeah, I don't have the exact date, but it's soon. We will be publishing that document for public review, and once that document is available for public review, we are expecting hard copies to provide to the planning commissioners. So there'll be hard copies at our office, at the public library. We'll also provide a website and link on our city website to get the word out. But yes, the commission will get that as soon as that's available to the public. You'll get it at the same time.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to statements of abstention by commissioners.
I'll be abstaining from item 8.3 on the agenda. The law firm that I work for does work for the applicant.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our public hearings this evening. First one is 8.1, the Hollyhock subdivision on Meta Avenue. That is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Peterson, anything to disclose?
I visited the site.
Okay.
Nothing to disclose for me.
I visited the site.
I visited the site. Nothing to disclose.
I visited the site and nothing else to disclose.
And I also visited the site with nothing else to disclose. So Susie Murray is staff, and we'll give our staff report.
And good afternoon, Chair Siska and Commissioners. Again, the project before you is the Hollyhock subdivision. Here is a slide that you're used to seeing that shows you if/when these units are built out. They'll put us 16 units closer to our market rate 2,550 units by 2022. So the project includes a conditional use permit for a small lot subdivision and a tentative map to subdivide a 2-acre parcel into 16 single-family lots. Here you can see the site. This is pulled back quite a ways so you can see the area surrounding the site. It's undeveloped and surrounded by, well, to the east and to the west by single-family residential, and to the south, it's just a larger lot, and to the north, it's undeveloped. Zooming in on the site, you can see there's not a whole lot there. There is the tree on the northern property line. It's a pretty significant oak tree, and there are conditions to protect that tree. The project site was one of 4 lots involved in a previously approved subdivision, the Glenview 2 subdivision, back in 2008. As part of that project, the site was rezoned to the single-family residential R16 zoning district. In August last year, the applicant completed 2 pre-application processes, the neighborhood meeting and a pre-application meeting with several members of city staff representing several departments. And then in September last year, the applications were submitted. The site is located in an area and surrounded on all 4 sides, designated for low-density residential by the general plan land use diagram. That allows development at a rate of 2 to 8 units per acre. The site zoning is consistent with the general plan, R16, single-family residential. The project has been reviewed in compliance with CEQA. The scope of the project was reviewed in the general plan EIR, General Plan 2035 EIR, which was adopted by the City Council in 2009. And the project also qualifies for an infill exemption. It's categorically exempt from CEQA. Here's a map of the project, and there was a question raised with regard to the bulb outs as traffic calming conditions. So on the east side along Brookwood, there is a bulb out as you enter or exit Hollyhock Place, the drive that goes down between the homes. On the west side of the site, Meda Avenue, there was some concern about the speed of traffic on that street, and as a condition of approval, and the applicant has agreed to, adding those bulb outs, the bulb out onto Meda Avenue, and will act as a traffic calming device there. So we had a public meeting about this and received several comments regarding, first, density. And this is, again, the general plan land use allows a density of 2 to 8 units per acre. It is a 2-acre site being developed at 8 units per acre. So it's right at the top of that threshold. There was some concern about recreational space, and as condition, the project is required to provide 400 square feet with no dimension of that 400 square foot area being less than 15 feet wide for private open space. There was some question about impacts to that property to the south, actually, specifically, because they have a pretty steep driveway, and there was concern that that might get steeper, and there will be no changes to the project or this property to the south. I already mentioned the traffic concerns. There was a lot of concern. I think probably the most common concern we heard was that the speed which people travel down Meda Avenue. So again, the bulb outs have been put there to help. And something we hear about quite a lot, at least I do, incremental public improvements, that you get just this much sidewalk and you need a lot more, but this is how we get our sidewalks. We get them a little bit at a time. So as parcels develop, we request those improvements, and eventually we have them connect. So, and then lastly, development standards, which really talks a little bit about that recreation, or includes the recreational space, but also building height and setbacks. And the project has been conditioned to comply with all the setback requirements, all the development standards for small lot subdivisions. So this is, historically, the Planning Commission has received architecture for small lot subdivisions. And so this one feels a little bit different, but there are no regulations that actually require that. So nothing in the zoning code, nothing on the application requirements requiring that, and because of that, the applicant has opted not to provide those, the elevations or the renderings. But the project has been conditioned to implement all the development standards. So those any plans that come in will be reviewed in compliance with the zoning code. And with that, there are no unresolved issues, and it is recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the Planning Commission approve a conditional use permit for a 16-parcel small lot subdivision and approve the Hollyhock tentative map. And I know that the applicant would like to say a few words, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions of staff right now? Okay, great. Yeah, Mr. Futrell.
For the record, Hugh Futrell, 204th Street. My firm is the developer as well as the owner of the property. I'll try to be as succinct as possible. Susie's staff report in writing and her oral presentation was very clear. This is, in some respects, probably the least complex project we've submitted to the city in many, many years. It's a very straightforward 16-lot subdivision on an infill basis with existing streets on 2 sides. The site conditions are relatively benign. We've taken steps to ensure that the one oak tree is properly preserved based on the arborist report. In the course of review of the project, there were several items that were raised by the public that we've endeavored to address. We did have a neighboring property owner who was concerned that the depth of the sewer might be inadequate to serve their needs. We made sure that that would not be a problem. There was some concern about traffic. Well, there's not a great deal we can do about this. This is a very tiny project, actually, in the middle of this neighborhood. People are concerned about the speeds on Maida and Brookwood. The proposal that was brought forward rather late in the process by the city to introduce bulb outs on either side of the subdivision to help create a psychological disincentive to driving quicker than you should, we readily embraced and are quite happy to do that. The project is consistent with the R16 district. It's consistent with the general plan. There is no planning ambiguity here whatsoever. It's very straightforward. Now, we spent a great deal of time on the site plan, even though it may appear to be relatively simple. My firm, in conjunction with our civil engineers and BKF, the civil engineers present here, do spend a great deal of time considering how building envelopes lay out in lots. Although we're most known to the public at this stage for mixed-use, fairly intense urban development, a good bit of what we have done historically is lower-income housing, which we build, own, and manage, and entry-level for-sale housing, such as, for example, the North Village subdivision in northwest Santa Rosa. One of the greatest objectives we have is to introduce affordable housing, both regulated and non-regulated, into the marketplace, and this project would do that. These are units of around 1,200 to 1,300 square feet, two-car garages. They would be sold for under $500,000. There is a pressing need for this kind of housing in the community. It is ownership housing, not rental housing. The site plan that's been laid out, as shown with the elaborate arrangement of setbacks, has variable front yard setbacks, pulls the garages back from the streetscape to emphasize the main building facade. Because these are wide, shallow lots, which is not a layout which you normally see because they tend to be more expensive in terms of site costs, because they're wide, shallow lots, it gives you the opportunity for a spread building facade, which creates a much more attractive streetscape with more landscaping, fewer emphasis on parking considerations, less concrete, more opportunity for larger overhangs and patios. There is plenty of private space as well as other setbacks. The project, in all these respects, is very straightforward, and I hope you will agree we've met all the required planning conditions. On the notion of architectural drawings being submitted historically, although that is true to some degree in recent years, actually historically it has been in sometimes yes, sometimes no kind of a thing. One of the very first small lot projects in Santa Rosa, the very, very massive Sierra Meadows project off College Avenue, for example, which was a project that my firm was asked to prepare the initial study for, had no design review. That was the very first one. And there's a number of others. The focus has been, in my experience, on the quality of site plan. The design review guidelines explicitly exclude elevation drawings from being subject to review and approval for single-family dwellings. That's explicit, and the design guidelines are, in fact, a creature of the general plan. On the other hand, the quality of site planning is most assuredly within your purview and the city's purview, and we've done our best to make it clear that we have developed a very sensitive plan. I would add only one other item, which is not directly related to our application because it's resolved, but I do think it's a policy issue that the Planning Commission should be conscious of. Over many, many months, indeed over many years, the city worked through committee and through interdepartmental meetings to come up with a series of street standards which are ultimately adopted by the City Council. Those street standards are what projects are now designed to. As in so many other areas of city land use requirements, the city was permissive, it was innovative, and it was ahead of the curve. Now what is in those standards is taken to be pretty common by the Urban Land Institute, by the APA, and other organizations. We originally designed this project with a 30-foot wide lane or neighborhood street. And we were deep into the process when we were told that the fire department's position was we couldn't do that. It had to be 32 feet, which was an older standard. I fully understand why the fire department took that position, but it was contrary to the city council adopted standards, contrary to the city's design guidelines, and if the city wants now to have 32-foot wide streets of that kind, it should put it into the standards and incorporate it into the design guidelines as fair warning to everyone. Now, we resolved this issue by going ahead and agreeing to widen to 32 feet and slightly narrowed the sidewalk while retaining, as is described in the staff report, a wider planting strip along the street. And I want to stress again, I don't object to fire's concern. They have their own views on this, but there's appropriate process, and there's a history on this issue which involved a great deal of conflict and a lot of discussion for a long time, and everyone should be conscious of that and should ensure the standards are well understood and can be applied project by project and not on an ad hoc basis as they were in our case. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the applicant right now before the public hearing? Okay, thanks, Mr. Vitale. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and open our public hearing. I have one card on this item, and that is for Lee Pierce. And Mr. Pierce, I know you know the 3-minute drill, so I'll repeat it for you.
You know me. Good evening, Commissioners, and Chair Cisco. It's good to see you again, even though it's on this side and that side. Let me begin by saying that I'm not here to protest the project. As a matter of fact, Mr. Futrell, when I sat on the Planning Commission, knows that I used to call him my wow developer. I liked the stuff that he did, Railroad Square and other places. Where I fall into concern this evening is where the rest of my neighbors fall, and that is the traffic situation. It is horrific. We have called for the city's little police monitor wagon to come out, and I've been there 2 years, and I've seen it, maybe once, but it's like way down the other, I'm at 2202 Brookwood, right on the other side of the blue sign. So we get the midpoint of the speeders, and I mean they speed. We're talking about big diesel pickup trucks, we're talking about sports cars. One of my neighbors told me there was a death on the corner a few houses to our right before we moved in. I wish that there's something that could be done before more deaths occur. There's elderly folks there taking walks all the time. I'm one of those elderly folks, but unfortunately I don't get to take a lot of walks. I'm working every day, this kind of thing. Hope to retire soon. But we really need to think about that human element, and I applaud Mr. Futrell for the new housing inventory coming in. It's badly needed. Thank you for that price point and the square footage. I have no concerns with that at all. I just want to know, in fact, my wife sitting up here never came to a meeting in my entire city council or planning commission years, and yet tonight she felt like I want to see and hear him say what's on my mind too. And so she, as well as a number of our neighbors, really regard this as a high concern in our neighborhood to get the quality of life that we think we deserve paying that kind of money to live there. So whatever you can do, please do it. And if there's a traffic study, I missed the meetings that you all had in the community. I'd love to see.
Thanks, Mr. Pearson. And I think we have someone from traffic here who maybe can give you some information. So,
Excellent.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? You don't have to have filled out a card if you just want to come down and speak to us on this item. Okay. No. Okay, come on down. You can go up there too. Yes. Just please restate your name for the record, or state it for the first time for the record.
Lee, where do I turn on the mic?
It's on.
Testing 1, 2.
Hi, I'm Diane Pierce, and I don't have much to say. I just wanted to mention in passing that Brookwood is used as a shortcut. I don't know if people know that. I do it myself. So there's a lot of traffic. They decide to go that way as opposed to down past the stables and all that way down onto Petaluma Hill Road. Everybody makes that little shortcut and comes up Brookwood. So it's already an issue. Those aren't neighbors. They're not people that live there. They're people just taking it as a shortcut. And a lot of them go a good 50 miles an hour along there. So our concern is that going to get worse? Is it going to be a bigger problem than it already is? So that's all I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this item, and I believe those are concerns best addressed by staff. I think Mr. Sprinkle's going to come down and help us out with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Rob Sprinkle, City Santa Rosa traffic engineer. I already offered to meet with Mr. Pierce following this meeting, so I'll follow up with him on that issue. We do recognize that Brookwood is used as a cut-through traffic currently. Really, the answer to that is the building of the Farmers Lane extension that connects from Farmers Lane over to the Yolanda. That's the main reason for that connection, is to provide the regional traffic that's using Brookwood, Henley, Aston as cut-throughs currently, to take that traffic out of those neighborhoods and put them on a more arterial street that is for that type of traffic, that is the cut-through traffic. So that is in our general plan. That is something that's being worked on. We do have a shortfall for funding that currently. Portions of that will be built with some of the other developments in the area, as also grading has been done with some of the current developments, like the Danauer subdivision, that have been already constructed. In the interim, I will meet with Mr. Pierce and his neighbors to discuss some of the other options we have. Unfortunately, I don't think speed humps are an option in that neighborhood, as Brookwood, I believe, is a primary response route for our fire response in the area. So we can look at doing some additional striping potentially, maybe some, and to get the speed trailer out there more often, as well as police enforcement. Really, that's where, if the speed limit's 30 or 35 at that location, they're the ones who are going to be able to really enforce that speed issue. So with that, I can only offer to meet with them and help as we can.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Sprinkle? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan?
Yeah, in your opinion, as these parcels, where Mr. Futrell's parcel is and then the other ones that are nearby, as they develop and they start putting these streets in between Mita and Brookwood, is that going to exacerbate the problem of speeding and traffic? Because I know Mita doesn't, it's got a dead end.
Mita is currently a dead end, and as Mita gets developed there, I don't know if it's a straight street that's going to go through, or if there is a curve in it. The curves actually help with speeds, because they break up that long site that you have just to kind of mosey along at a higher speed than you would normally think. But as you do add subdivisions and you do add side friction to the roads, you do get slower speeds typically, because you have more intersections along the street, which adds to that friction. Right now, Brookwood is basically, there's hardly anything built out on the west side of Brookwood or on the east side of Mita. So there is a much more wide open feeling than there are as things get developed. You'll see a similar situation down on Dutton Meadow as Denton Meadows has been developed south of the school there, and as the intersections have been added along there, it does become more neighborhood-like than rural feeling, and it does help with the speeding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Sprinkle? Yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
Not as to this particular project, but do sometimes the fire department requirements for the width of streets or requirements for the width of streets from other parts of the zoning code or from state law, from wherever, do those sometimes lead to streets that are so wide that the speed limits just sort of become a suggestion, and for all practical purposes, people can and do drive way faster than that?
I would think that, I wouldn't think so. For a neighborhood street, I think our standard is a 36-foot wide neighborhood street, which is 2 10-foot travel lanes and 8-foot parking. I live on a 36-foot wide street, and because we don't have a center line, people still tend to pull over out of each other's way and kind of let people go, even though there's actually plenty of room to do that. So we're not building streets as wide as we used to. We used to build streets, for example, Cunningham, I'm not sure if you're familiar where that is, but that's over off of Peterson. I believe it's a 46 or 44-foot wide street. It's huge, and it doesn't need to be. So we're not building streets like that anymore. If anything, we're building them more and more narrow than we have in the past.
Great, thank you.
I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's a good answer, thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Mr. Sprinkle? Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. And then, Ms. Murray, just to reconfirm that the purpose of the bulb outs on Mita was for traffic calming. So could you just say a little bit more about that so that Mr. Pierce is aware that we're making an attempt with this project to a bigger problem?
So I'm going to look back for Rob's approval on my comments, but Mita is going to be improved to a minor street, so those bulb outs will have more of an effect on a narrower street, whereas over on Brookwood, they may not have that same effect. Yeah. So that is exactly why we're doing, Mr. Futrell will be putting the bulb outs along Mita and agreed to that. As he said, we asked, he said yes. So, thank you.
Okay. And then to address Mr. Futrell's point on policy, the friction between fire department requirements versus our development standards, where would one go with that?
Right now, my understanding is that we're in the review process for updating those standards. It's a process that started a while back, and it's in process again. It's in motion again. That street standard is one that we see in other parts of the city, and we came up with a very workable solution, and that was by narrowing the sidewalk, a 5-foot sidewalk, to 4 feet on either side. We gained that extra 2 feet, and still have the narrower street, so it's not as appealing as a cut-through. And with those bulb outs at the end, makes it less appealing. And I'm talking about the bulb outs now on the east and west ends that are along Hollyhock Place. But I think we came up with it. Yes, we have a standard. The fire department does not like that standard, and we are, with our pre-application meeting, we can alert developers, and I know that it's something that our engineering development services team is working on right now.
Okay.
To
great.
update those standards.
Great. Okay. Any other questions of staff? Yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
It's pretty clear, I think, for CEQA purposes that this falls within the general plan EIR, as you stated in the staff report, so this isn't about whether the project, in my opinion, satisfies CEQA, but when it comes to the infill Class 32 exclusion, I see that the standard for determining whether it's infill is whether it's substantially surrounded, I think is the word, by urban uses. Obviously, the entire area surrounding this project site is zoned for development, but the north side of it isn't developed now, neither is the south very much. Or the south is.
The south is,
okay.
yeah.
Is there a certain number, percentage of perimeter that needs to be surrounded by development, or how exactly does the substantiality get determined for that exemption?
I think we've looked at it on most sides, so in this case, we've got 4 sides, and we look also at the build out on those. So, I mean, there's quite a lot. Let me pull back on here. It's higher density to the east and west, and to the south it's residential development. So there is that area to the north that is not developed yet. It's got the same land use, and again, it's developed on all 3 sides, or the other 3 sides, so substantially developed. I don't know that we have a clear definition of substantially developed, and I can certainly look into that, but I put that on there, and we have multiple, it qualifies for CEQA, it meets, it's been found in compliance with CEQA on 2 levels. So as a categorical exemption, which, there is one side that it's not developed to the north, but also with that it's consistent with the general plan EIR that was reviewed. So.
Great, thank you.
Does that answer?
Yeah, Commissioner Weeks.
I have a general question. When is it decided whether affordable units are provided or the in-lieu payment is going to be made?
That's up to the applicant, and so, I mean, we generally know that when the application is submitted. They have the option. I suppose if the developer wanted to declare that a certain percentage, 15% I think it is, of these units were going to be for, meeting that very low or low income requirement, I suppose that we would, consider that in exchange for the in-lieu fee, but that is the developer's choice.
Right, I understand that, and in the resolution, it talks about that decision hasn't been made yet. So I guess my general question is, when is that decision made?
I think I'm going to say, I think the developer has already made that decision, and these will be market rate units, and he will be paying an in-lieu fee. However, if he wanted to change his mind, I don't think that building permit, how's that? When they submit for building permits.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? And any other questions of the applicant before we move on? Okay, so let's bring it back to the commission for discussion. And would somebody like to move a resolution for the purposes of discussion?
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a small lot subdivision conditional use permit for Hollyhock located at 1650 Mita Avenue, Assessor's Parcel Number 044-032-006, File Number PRJ16-0022, and waive for the reading.
Second.
And that was seconded. Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. And Vice Chair Edmondson, would you like to start?
Thank you. I find myself agreeing with the statement from the applicant that it's a pretty clear-cut project. There's not much complicated about it from a land use perspective. Good change is made for traffic calming purposes. Some of the public comment that the commission got in writing before this meeting had to do with frustration from some neighborhood residents in this area about, having expected that there would be a market and places within walking distance that residents there would be able to access, and some of the land in that area is designated for that, but it's not realized yet. And so I think that was a good complaint to hear, because we do have a lot of single-family residential zones in the city that are vast and in which there are no neighborhood businesses, no little grocery stores or little coffee shops or little places to go or places for ordinary services that in a lot of places in the world you see perfectly consistent with residential living. And everybody, for every item that I've ever seen on the Planning Commission, complains about traffic, because traffic is really unpleasant and it's bad. And a huge reason that we have so much of it is because it's impossible to live a daily life in the way we've chosen to design the city without a car, because nobody has the time or necessarily the wherewithal, the physical ability to haul your groceries on your bicycle or by foot for what could be miles. And when we have our planning processes, general plan and zoning processes, I think we have to be careful to make sure that these single-family zones are broken up by discrete areas where we can put some mixed-use development that people can use for neighborhood amenities. We need to make walking an option in the city. That being said, the project is clearly totally in compliance with all of the zoning code, general plan. I can make all the findings for the conditional use permit, and I support the project.
Okay. Commissioner Weeks?
I also will support the project. I do appreciate the fact that the project is on the higher end of the density scale, and that they are smaller units, and I think that's really good for Santa Rosa and the diverse market that we have.
Okay. Commissioner Duggan?
I'm also in support of the project. Also, as my colleagues have said, I appreciate the smaller sizes of the houses and the lower price point. I can also second Vice Chair Vincent's comments about having neighborhood areas. If you're in San Francisco, the little commercial areas throughout the neighborhoods make it very easy to do lots of chores without getting in your car and driving everywhere. So that's something to keep in mind for the whole city, not just here. Otherwise, I do think it's a real clear project. My only concern is, like I said, about connecting Meta and Brookwood, just because of the traffic in that area, but I appreciate Mr. Sprinkle's comments about the friction from the side streets, providing some reason for speeding cars to maybe slow down a little bit because they might have cross traffic. Otherwise, I can make all the findings for the conditional use permit, and I think the fact that we don't have architectural drawings is fine, because we've got all the setback lines defined, and those projects will be reviewed as they come forward for the houses. So I'm in support of it.
Okay. Commissioner Rumble?
I'm supportive of the project as well. I think just sort of outside of the project, the conversations around traffic and kind of mixing up uses is really great, and we should explore that further. And very supportive of looking at traffic up and down Brookwood and how to calm that. I wouldn't pin that at all on this development, and I think it's a good project.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson?
I'm also in support of the project, and I would echo the very eloquent thoughts of my fellow commissioners, specifically with regard to my appreciation of the density of the project, and again, just sort of as a broad, beyond the purview of this specific project, the notion of walkability as both a lifestyle and traffic reducing device. I appreciate the applicant's responsiveness to the concerns of the fire department, as well as city staff with the bulb outs, and I want to thank city staff for their hard work on this.
Okay. And I'm also in support of the project. I really appreciate your willingness to do the traffic calming measure of including the bulb outs on Meta, and I appreciate the public's difficulty with how development occurs in increments, how you get a portion of a sidewalk here and then you got to wait for the next portion. And we're always wrestling with the relationship between getting enough density to support commercial centers. That's always something that's important. And so, again, I think because of the housing needs and the density needs in order to support commercial projects, in order to get walkability, I appreciate you going at the high end of the density in this range. So with that, I also am for the project. And that again was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble, and your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Groninger being absent. And we have one more resolution.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the Hollyhock tentative map located at 1650 Mita Avenue, file number PRJ 16-022, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. Any other comments or discussion relative to the tentative map? Okay, we're good. So with that, your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Groninger being absent, and that concludes this item. Thank you. Okay. Do we want to take a 5-minute break before we move on? Okay. So go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call back to order our meeting, and we are going to move on to our next item, which is 8.2, the Canaplaya Cultivation Facility, and it is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Peterson, let's start.
I visited the site and no additional disclosure. Oh, excuse me. I also had a telephone call with the applicant's consultant.
Okay.
I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative.
I visited the site and met with the applicant's representative and have no additional information.
I visited the site and had a phone conversation with the applicant's consultant and have no new information.
I visited the site and met with the applicant's representative and nothing else to disclose.
Okay, and I also visited the site and met with the applicant's representative and have no new information. With that, Mr. Streeter is staff, and we'll do the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Sisko, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is a conditional use permit application for the Canaplaya Medical Cannabis Cultivation Facility. The project includes indoor cultivation of medical cannabis in an existing 32,000 square foot building. The project would employ approximately 30 employees, and that would be spread out over 4 shifts, and there would be 24-hour operation of this facility. The applicant is proposing 21 on-site parking spaces to accommodate the employees. There would be no retail component to this, so all the parking would just go to employees of the facility. And as this is an existing building, there are minimal exterior changes proposed, though any exterior changes would require some level of design review. The project is located in northwest Santa Rosa in a predominantly industrial portion of the city. As was mentioned, it's an existing building that was previously used for warehousing and distribution and processing of secondhand goods with a retail component. Immediately south of the project site is an athletic facility. To the north are several multi-tenant industrial buildings. To the east are commercial uses along Coffee Lane with single and multifamily residential further east of once you cross Coffee. And there are industrial uses to the west, and also a athletic gymnastics school immediately adjacent to the project site. So the project site was previously used for those manufacturing and warehousing uses that I had mentioned previously. So there are a number of roll-up doors and loading areas. Those would be abandoned. One of the front roll-up doors would be converted into an entrance, and the existing pedestrian entrance would remain on the front. The only roll-up door that would remain used for deliveries and operation would be the one that's recessed towards the rear of the building, and that would be in a secure delivery area. There are currently 4 curb cuts along the frontage of the building. 2 of those would be abandoned, so there'd be 1 curb cut for entering the site and 1 curb cut for leaving the site. A little history on medical cannabis within the city of Santa Rosa. In 2015, the state signed into law the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, which was meant to establish regulatory framework for cannabis cultivation and the support uses. The City Council made a priority of bringing our regulatory framework up to speed with the state's new laws. So in January of 2016, the council initiated the formation of a comprehensive policy for cannabis in the city. An interim zoning ordinance was adopted in February, which allowed commercial cultivation of medical cannabis within the light industrial and general industrial districts, as well as the limited light industrial combining district. That limited light industrial combining district, there's now a moratorium. So general industrial and light industrial are the only 2 zoning districts where this use is currently allowed. Regarding this project, in January of this year, a neighborhood meeting was held to introduce neighbors to the project and gather feedback. Later that month, the applicant submitted the application for the conditional use permit for cultivation. And during staff's review, staff requested that a traffic study be prepared to address concerns about traffic generation for this use. And the applicant had that study prepared in May, and it's been added to the city's review of the project. The general plan calls for light industry land use development in the site. As you can see, it's surrounded on all sides by this land use designation. The zoning is less restrictive. It's for general industrial uses, and this zoning district typically accommodates the types of uses that would have objectionable impacts on residential or other sensitive receptors. As was mentioned previously, the project site plan would have one entrance and one exit. So vehicles would enter from Bluebell Drive and either go to the secure delivery area towards the, on that inset portion of the site, or go into one of the parking spaces and exit through a designated curb cut. There are 21 parking spaces proposed, as well as the necessary ADA compliant pathfinding on the site. The interior of the site, the majority of the building would be converted for use with the growing and processing of the medical cannabis product. Immediately through the front threshold of the building would be the main facility supports, such as offices and security. And as was mentioned previously, there's a secure delivery area on the west side of the building. Public comments received by staff both at the neighborhood meeting and leading up to this public hearing have primarily been regarding the traffic, so the traffic that exists, that existed for the previous use versus traffic that would be generated from the new use, as well as potential impact of medical cannabis cultivation to property values, and various land use concerns, including the school that's next door, hours of operation, and then noise and odor utilities, whether or not there'd be appropriate utilities to support this use, and concern about the types of products and chemicals that would be going onto the site. So staff did look more closely at some of these issues, including the noise and odor control, on-site security, as well as the parking that's proposed. Regarding noise and odor, the project description includes measures that are meant to reduce those impacts, including mounting the HVAC units on the roof, providing interior break rooms so that there are not employees outside of the building, carbon filtration systems, deliveries only occurring during business hours, even though it'll be a 24-hour operation, the deliveries will only be during standard business hours. And the draft resolution does include a condition regarding odor control, that it's not detectable outside of the building. So, a part of, if this permit is approved, one part of that, the validity of the permit is that all the odor is contained within the facility. Regarding security, there is a secure loading area proposed. The applicant has also indicated that they would be providing 24-hour on-site security for this site. And then standard measures for security for cannabis cultivation facilities are also a part of this project description, including alarms, employee background checks, and as well as security training for all employees. Regarding parking, the zoning code doesn't have a standard for cannabis cultivation for parking required. What staff has done in the past is made the determination that without a retail component, cultivation is similar to the warehousing and wholesale distribution land use, where the standard is 1 space per 1,000 square feet, or as determined by conditional use permit. Because the project proposes a maximum of 30 employees that would not be on site at one time, it'd be divided over those 4 shifts. And because the site has easy access to the bicycle network as well as the transit network, staff finds that the 21 sites that are proposed would be appropriate for this use. So considering those factors, it's the recommendation of Planning and Economic Development that the Planning Commission approve a conditional use permit for the Canna Medical Cannabis Cultivation Facility. Staff just became aware that there was no slide for the California Environmental Quality Act. So just to address that, the project does qualify for a Class 1 categorical exemption under CEQA Guidelines Section 15301 in that it's an existing facility just being re-tenanted. And the applicant is present and would like to make a presentation, and staff is available for questions. Thank you.
Any questions of staff right now? Not seeing any. Okay. So would the applicant like to come down and present? Okay, he can distribute those to us.
I'm going to read my comments off my phone, if you don't mind.
Off your phone, okay. And if you wouldn't mind restating your name, or stating your name for the record for us, please.
My name's Michael Perlman. I'm a managing member, an applicant for the project at SRC Holdings. It's the company that owns the building. I guess Canopla is the name of the project we put forward. So, Chairman Cisco and members of the commission, thank you for having us this evening. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge and thank Patrick Streeter. He's done a thorough job and been accessible and responsive and presented you an excellent overview of our project. We are in agreement and accept the conditions that have been incorporated into the resolution and looking forward to moving forward, taking the next steps to establish our business here in Santa Rosa. As you consider the application before you, I'd like to comment on just a few issues that I know are of concern. First and foremost is security. I know there were some questions about access and the alarm system. So I just wanted to say that all the exterior windows, doors, and other openings will have contacts connected to the alarm system. Primary entrances and exits will have magnetic locking systems with key fob readers. The fobs have unique codes allowing programming of entry and recording of the events. The alarm system will have sensors throughout the facility, including dry contacts, motion detection, 2-point beams, and environmental sensors as necessary to adequately monitor not only the perimeter, but interior doors and movement, as well as monitoring indoor environmental conditions. The alarm will be monitored 24/7 via off-site station through cellular service, as well as with a battery backup system to provide adequate signaling time. As we mentioned before, there will be a 24/7 site guard. We found that that's the best deterrent to combat crime is just having somebody there. The on-site guard will be contracted with a third-party licensed and bonded professional guard service. I know there was a question about fencing. Our feeling is that fencing is more liability and isn't really warranted. The building is secure, access is limited, and fences, frankly, would draw more attention to the building, eliciting questions about activity going on inside, as well as providing cover to potential threat. Our plan has met approval of public safety agencies, and we feel confident that our security measures are more than adequate. I would like to also address concerns about cash management at the facility. Since we're not open to the public and not a retail operation, we feel that there would be little, if any, cash on hand. Products will be delivered directly to dispensaries and distribution services where payments will be received. At most, management would have petty cash fund for day-to-day operational needs. In regards to storage of product, we feel as though our product have limited shelf life and that freshness is of the utmost importance. With that thought in mind, we feel as though it's in the company's best interest to sell our products as they become available and to produce based off an anticipated demand. As our product ages, its value is decreased, so our intent is to get the product to market as quickly as possible. And that nothing is gained by keeping inventory of the processed product on hand. My notes on the odor control. Okay. I'm going to freehand the odor control because it's not on my phone, but you guys got it. It's Basically, the facility is designed in 2 tiers of filtration, so that as you saw on the design plans, you have internal grow space and then external, still an internal envelope, but we plan to filter the internal grow rooms, and then the inside of the building that's not inside the considered grow space will also be filtered, and then the exhaust is vented through the roof. And what that does is create a negative pressure on the building, so it really eliminates the ability for smell to seep out in small places. The filtration that we use is active carbon filtration. I gave you guys some supplements on the end of that. I anticipate 12 to 15 filtration units that each one scrubs 2,000 cubic feet per minute. So that's approximately 30,000 cubic feet being filtered every minute. It's something that we've done in the past, and I don't anticipate the smell being any sort of issue. I would like to close by saying we firmly believe we'll be improving the condition of the neighborhood from the thrift store warehouse that was previously there. Security will be improved. There won't be drop-offs of used goods at the front door during the night. Traffic trips will be significantly reduced because there's no retail, especially large trucks. I went to the site several times before we purchased the building, and there's dumpsters and quite a few 18-wheel trucks, and I think that we're going to have several deliveries a week and probably 20-foot box trucks, and that would be the extent of it. I would also like to mention one of our agents has talked to the owner of the gymnastics center next door. She's supportive of our use and had no concerns with the cannabis operation in the neighborhood. I want to again thank staff for an excellent presentation. I'm available to answer any questions you guys may have.
Any questions of the applicant right now? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, thank you for the handout you gave us of your comments. I just want to ask about security in the parking lot. Are you going to have cameras over the parking area?
Yeah, I know in the state mandates us to have cameras on everything, and it's supposed to be recorded for 90 days. So we have designed a security office at the very front entrance of the building where he'll have control of cameras on the parking lot and be able to view and monitor everything that's going on at the facility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Rumble.
I appreciate the responses to the security issues. I had similar questions, particularly on the, sort of the cash availability and the product availability, and those not being there to sort of attract crime. The one unanswered question that I had in looking at some of the public comments, there was some interest in sort of the environmental side of things, so water management and pesticide or chemical use, and I was wondering if you could provide a little bit more information on how you address those two things.
Okay, let me start with the water management. It's easy. Being an indoor cultivation, we use quite a bit less water than you would think is necessary for traditional farming. On top of that, we recollect. There's quite a bit of dehumidification equipment installed, and the air conditioning units also draw a lot of water out of the air. So what we do is collect all the condensate, and on the plans on the outside, I guess it says RO tank, but that means reverse osmosis, basically pure water. So what we'll do is capture all that condensation and bring it back to the tank, and it doesn't provide all the water that we need, but at least 50 to 60% of the water is actually reclaimed and reused. As far as pesticide management, I know that we have to have pesticide applicators licensed. The applicators are supposed to take courses and have licensing. It's all supposed to be stored in metal containers, And I know California is working on a list, and we currently use lists we get a list from Washington and Colorado and try to stick to the standards that are presented in the states that have it completed.
Any other questions of the applicant right now? Great. Thank you, Mr. Perlman.
Thank you.
Okay. This is a public hearing tonight, and I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have any cards on this item, but if you would like to come down and speak, feel free to do that. I'm not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any other questions of staff? Staff has something to say to us. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Cisco. If I could just provide a clarification. During the staff presentation, it was noted that there'd be no detectable odor outside the building as a condition of approval. That's not actually in the draft resolution, so staff is proposing that the draft resolution, condition number 4C, be amended to read, odor control shall be regulated and maintained such that odors of medical cannabis are not detected outside of the building. This shall include the applicant's proposed air filtration system installed, operated, and maintained consistent with manufacturer specifications and provisions.
Okay.
And just one follow-up note, this is the same condition that has been applied to the previous 6 cultivation permits with the city.
It sounded familiar. Okay. Okay. So with that, would someone like to move a resolution which will include that amendment?
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a conditional use permit for the Cana Playa Medical Cannabis Cultivation Facility located at 2150 Bluebell Drive, Assessor's Parcel Number 015-370-065, File Number CUP 17-003, with the amended Condition 4C in the resolution, and waive for the reading.
Second.
Okay, so that resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. And Commissioner Duggan, would you like to begin the discussion?
Sure. I think it's a pretty straightforward proposal, and I don't have any issues with it. I think it meets all the findings in the resolution, and I'm in support of the project.
Okay. Commissioner Rumble.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this one's pretty straightforward, and some of the issues that I would have been a bit hung up on, or I was hung up on in prior similar projects that came forward, I think we worked through, the proximity to a youth-serving institution like the gymnastics center. My daughter used to go to the gymnastics center, so I know the area well, and issues of security and cash management and all those I feel like we kind of worked through those sticking points, and so this one to me feels pretty straightforward, and not really anything more to say other than I'm supportive.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson.
I'm also in support of this project. I echo the concerns, the comments of my fellow commissioners. I think it's a pretty straightforward project. Although I do want to note in particular, I appreciate the applicant's clarification of the fence issue and the potential to be sort of a nuisance attracting development. And I would make all necessary findings.
Vice Chair Edmondson.
I don't have a lot to add. It is a straightforward project from my perspective. Some of the public comments that we got in correspondence focused on some of the negative impacts and most of them weren't cannabis specific. They were about the negative impact of living near an industrial project, industrial zone. And I think that when it comes to the kind of uses that can be permitted by right without even a public hearing in an industrial zone, if you compare that to the impact on surrounding land from a cannabis project like this, I think that this is significantly easier to live next to than a lot of those other uses might be. So I agree with the applicants that it's going to be an improvement in the livability of the neighborhood, and I support the project.
And Commissioner Weeks.
I also support the project. It is pretty straightforward, and I would like to tell the applicant I really appreciated all the detail in the documents you provided to us. I had questions, and they were answered by reading that, so thank you.
Great. And I'm also in favor of the project. It is very straightforward, well-conditioned, fairly insulated in terms of this industrial area from neighboring residences, and I completely echo Vice Chair Edmondson's opinions about that. I think it's going to be an improvement to that area. So with that, that resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble, and your votes, please. And that passes with 6 ayes, Commissioner Groniger being absent. And I believe that concludes that item. And before we move on, we need to give Vice Chair Edmondson an opportunity to exit. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to 8.3, which is the terraces at Mount Taylor. It is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Peterson, anything to disclose?
I visited the site and no additional disclosures.
I have nothing to disclose.
I visited the site and have nothing else to disclose.
I visited the site once I could find it. Thank you, Amy, for helping me. And nothing further to disclose.
And I also visited the site and have nothing further, no new information. And with that, Amy Nicholson is staff, and will give the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Cisco, members of the Commission. The item before you is the Terraces at Mount Taylor project. You've already seen this slide this evening. This is related to the city's housing action plan and the number of units we would like to have constructed by the year 2022. This proposal includes 11 market rate units and would achieve 0.43% of the 2,550 unit goal. The Terraces at Mount Taylor project is a proposed 11-lot subdivision which would consist of detached single-family dwellings on a 1.74 acre parcel, and then a landscaped open space parcel is also included. The project site is located in southeast Santa Rosa within an established residential neighborhood. This is an aerial photograph of the site and the surroundings, and properties to the northwest and south are currently developed with some more dense and some less dense detached single-family units. As you can see, the properties immediately east of the site are not developed, and these are actually owned by the city of Santa Rosa and would eventually have the farmers lane extension constructed through them. The 1.74 acre site actually excludes the existing residence at 2853, so, or I should say the site includes it, but the tentative map has that residence outside of the tentative map boundary. And so the remainder lot is proposed to be approximately half of an acre. There are some existing accessory structures on site that would be demolished. And topography of the site is generally flat, although there are a few areas with slopes that exceed 10% on both the northern and southern portion of the site. In April of 2016, staff and the applicant team held a pre-application meeting for the proposed project. And in June of 2016, a neighborhood meeting was held with the applicant team and residences who chose to attend. In September of 2016, an application for both the tentative map and small lot conditional use permit were submitted to the Planning and Economic Development Department, and in October, a notice of application was distributed to property owners within 400 feet of the site. After staff's review, it was determined that a hillside development permit would be required, and that application was submitted February of this year. The site is designated as low-density residential under the general plan, which allows between 2 and 8 units per acre. The project is consistent with that allowed density range and proposes 6.3 dwelling units per acre, so at the higher end, and that higher density is achieved through the small lot conditional use permit. Low-density residential land use is intended primarily for single-family dwellings, and as you can see from this graphic, every property touching this site and beyond is designated for this low-density use. The project is consistent with a number of housing, urban design, and land use policies and goals from the general plan. In particular, it does propose housing at the higher end of the density that's allowed under the general plan. It does propose a variety of different housing types in terms of architecture, so it avoids a kind of repetitive appearance, and has been found to relate to several of the urban design policies related to hillside development, including minimizing grading. As was elaborated on in your staff report, the result of the neighborhood meeting was to try and have the proposal fit in better with the existing residential development to the west, which has padded lots, and these lots were proposed to essentially match the height of the pads to the west. And so while this does result in a little bit more grading, it also helps to achieve better compatibility with the surrounding development. In addition, the houses each contain front porches and quite a bit of glazing on the front to help with social interaction, and development is achieved, or the higher end of the residential development is achieved consistent with the land use policy that requests that all development falls within that density range requested by the general plan. The site is currently within the R16 single-family residential zoning district, and the proposal includes lot sizes that are less than 6,000 square feet. That is allowed in the R16 district, but does require the small lot conditional use permit. In addition, there are some portions of the site that exceed slopes of 10%, and so a hillside development permit is required for those particular areas. So through staff analysis, found that the project is consistent with a number of development standards for hillside small lot subdivisions, including lot size and coverage, the requirement for private open space, in addition to parking. So 4 parking spaces are required for each detached single-family dwelling, and the proposal includes 4 spaces for each unit, so 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway. So this graphic here shows the proposed tentative map. The yellow area indicates the 11 proposed lots. The red area shows the remainder parcels, so this is not included within the boundaries of the map. And the green area indicates the parcel A, which is to remain undeveloped, and would act as kind of a park amenity for the residents. The primary reason behind this parcel A is to allow for easy maintenance of the existing drainage feature that's there. The city currently has an easement to maintain it, and based on that, it seemed more appropriate for it to be a space that would be easily accessed instead of in someone's private yard. This tentative map also shows the proposed private lane, so it is a continuation of Force Lane, and as you can see, there is no connection through to Linwood Avenue. The lane is mostly 20 feet wide, but there are several areas that could accommodate additional vehicles, so they do bump out into several parking bays. And on the west side of the site, there is a fire turnaround that's long enough to both allow for a turnaround and vehicle parking. The site plan shows the different architecture and house plans proposed for each of the 11 lots. They are a mix of 1 and 2 stories, so these first 3 lots here are all proposed to be 1 story, and each different color represents a different elevation. So you'll see there's a number of different house plans throughout the subdivision, but the remainder would be 2 stories in height. And as I mentioned, there are on-street parking spaces shown as these little green rectangles. So there's 5 additional spaces to the 4 provided for each unit. There are 3 house plans proposed, and each house plan has 2 elevations, elevation A and B, and all of those were included in your staff packet. On the screen here, I just have a selection of each house plan. And so you can see there are 2 two-story plans and 1 one-story plan, and then the additional elevation would be similar in some ways, but different enough to provide variety. This graphic here is the proposed landscape plan, and it is for just a portion of the site, although the landscaping remains consistent for the remaining 2 lots. These larger trees shown here are proposed to be oak trees, and then there are a variety of kind of smaller ornamental trees proposed. The private open space parcel A proposes quite a few of the oak trees, and there isn't grading proposed in that area. It is a sloped area, but it's proposed to remain pretty much natural. Staff doesn't have any unresolved issues at this time. However, something addressed in the staff report and early in the process with the applicant team was the hillside development, or the areas that would be subject to hillside development. And as I will bring up on the next slide, there was a stockpile on the site at one point. This did change the contours of the site, and this stockpile was permitted through the county back when the property was within the county's jurisdiction. And so this slope analysis shows the contour lines prior to a stockpile being placed on the site. All of the blue indicates areas less than 10%, so no hillside standards are required there. And then any color besides blue requires or is subject to hillside development, the hillside development ordinance. And so after the stockpile, you can see there's a change in topography, in particular on the back side of, or the west side of lots 1 through 4, and then down the middle of the private lane. And this is essentially the boundaries of where the stockpile was. And so staff determined that we wouldn't require the hillside development permit for the lots that had altered slopes, since the intent is to protect natural features. But there are portions of the site that contain natural slopes, and so those are subject to hillside review. As I mentioned earlier, there was a neighborhood meeting for this project, and several neighbors did attend. Many comments related to just the visual prominence and the residences fitting in with the existing neighborhood. I was not the planner that attended that meeting. However, those comments were taken into consideration by the applicant team, and they did make several adjustments to the project based on that feedback. The project application was noticed, and at that time, 1 telephone comment was received with a question about the circulation of the project. Since the staff report was written, a few additional comments have come in, so I'd just like to briefly address those. 2 of those were forwarded to you. They were emails. 1 was related to the trees, the drainage, or waterways and deer on the site, and another was related to the process. The particular homeowner had purchased the property when it was still within the county's limits, and he was trying to better understand the process of how it got into the city and then what our process is for subdividing this property. In addition, I did receive a phone call today regarding construction and the hours that the construction would be occurring. There are not any specific conditions related to construction timing, including in the resolution. Generally, if that's not a condition that's in the resolution, we would look to the noise ordinance, and a project would need to be consistent with that. So the neighbor and the applicant actually had a conversation about it, and they are both present tonight. So one thing that I understand that they've agreed to is that construction wouldn't start until 8 a.m. on any weekday. So it would go from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and that Saturday construction would be limited. And so the resident asked that there be no construction on Saturday, and the applicant is proposing to start later, so maybe 9, and to make a good faith effort to have kind of more quiet construction occur on Saturday, and then no construction on Sundays or holidays. But I want to raise that as something that could maybe be discussed as a friendly amendment. And the applicant team is here. They don't have a presentation, but Phil Natoli, the applicant, is present. Matt Taylor from Farrell Faber Architects is here. Andy Bordessa, who's a civil engineer, and Rick from Firma Landscape is also available. So I'm available for questions, as are they. And the project was reviewed in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act and does qualify for a Class 32 exemption, which is the infill exemption, in that it's consistent with the general plan and zoning. It occurs within the city limits on a site of no more than 5 acres. Is substantially surrounded by urban uses, has no habitat for endangered, rare, or threatened species, and would have no significant impacts related to traffic, noise, air, or water quality. There are several technical studies that are or have been included to support this exemption. And with that, the Planning and Economic Development Department recommends that the Planning Commission approve the Hillside Development Permit, Conditional Use Permit, and tentative map to subdivide the site into 11 single-family, to subdivide the site and then allow for the construction of 11 single-family dwellings. And as just one additional note, the resolutions need to be adopted in a different order from what they were loaded as. So the first resolution to be, I guess, discussed should be the conditional use permit, followed by the tentative map, and that would be followed by the Hillside Development Permit.
Okay, any questions of staff right now? I just have one. Amy, when we come to discussing a potential friendly amendment, is that going to be relative to the conditional use permit resolution or the tentative map resolution?
The friendly amendment could be added to the use permit resolution.
Okay, great. Just want to know where we would be talking about it. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
And would the applicant like to make any kind of presentation?
How you doing this evening? Thank you for hearing our project. We appreciate your time and, of course, all your efforts in bringing good housing and good projects to the city of Santa Rosa. You know, we've actually been working on this project for quite some time. I think the question came up about when the project was annexed into the city. And we've been started that over probably, you know, right around 2006. But it took, you know, a couple years beyond the fallout in the housing market to actually bring it back around. And then we followed through and annexed the property in subsequent to that. And here's our project. So this project's been in the making for quite some time. So we're really happy about bringing it before you today. We actually hired a really good team, and they've been very helpful in actually coming up with a good, you know, really various floor plans. And we've been working with the neighbors quite a bit in order to make this project not only, you know, reasonable for them, but, you know, since they do have a wonderful view outside their homes of Mount Taylor, we wanted to make sure that, you know, that we'd preserve as much of the view as possible and to allow them to enjoy the property as much as possible. So with that, if you have any questions of us, please feel free. We have our team here, and we're happy to answer any questions whatsoever.
Okay. Could I have you put your name on the record for Mr.
Sure.
Mahoney?
My name is Phil Natoli.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any question? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan has a question.
Yeah, I just asked Mr. Natoli, what were the hours of construction that you agreed to?
Oh, okay. Well, we've actually had a couple discussions on that point, and it's only late in the game that we started discussing the construction hours. It's something that we're willing to work with, and I think it was, let's see, we're looking at an 8 o'clock start time rather than a 7 o'clock, which is the city mandated start for the construction, and then till 7 p.m. During the weekdays. And as far as weekends go, you know, we would actually be happy to start a little bit later and keep the decibel level on the weekends, you know, down to a minimum. So quieter work on the weekends, painting, texturing, that kind of thing could take place. But I think we may need those Saturdays in order to get this project done from time to time. And I believe my neighbors are very reasonable, and we've worked on some of those details, and we'll be happy to work with them on that as well. Hopefully that's reasonable for them. I would imagine it is.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions I can help you?
Questions of the applicant or the team right now? Great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Tolley, thanks. Okay, this is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and repeat that you have 3 minutes. When you come down to speak, please state your name for the record. Watch the light bar as it travels from green to yellow to red, because when it hits red, I'm going to ask you to stop. And so we're going to go ahead and begin with, I think it's Joel Daughtry, or I'm not sure. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Joel Donchos. I appreciate the Planning Commission's giving me this opportunity to come here and speak today. I do live in the neighborhood, and I've lived there since 2012. It's my neighborhood. I know it very well. And when I moved into the neighborhood and I was introduced to the neighborhood, I saw the surrounding areas, and I was told by my neighbors and by my realtor at the time and everybody I knew there that the lay of the land was, you know, you had developed areas and homes built here, but in this area behind a certain fence line, it was all county property, and it was pristine, and it was set aside to be protected and open space, and that was my understanding. And I've lived there now for 5 years, and I come to this meeting, and it's a proposal to subdivide it into single-family homes, as opposed to let's open the discussion about changing it from county property or another alternative. So you can imagine my surprise. So I came here with comments and more questions, probably nothing I can include in a 3-minute limitation, but a couple comments. I heard the presentation include something to the effect that this project wouldn't be an intrude, I can't remember the exact word they used, conflict with traffic or intrusion on, or that it was an infill, and it wouldn't impact, impact traffic, and it wouldn't impact open space or wildlife. So again, I live in the neighborhood, I see it every day, and that couldn't possibly be further from the truth. Every day there's wildlife right in this area. There's foxes, coyotes, there are deer that live in the neighborhood, turkeys, skunks, every day. These animals live in this area. Absolutely nowhere around this specific property is there building. I do understand that there is, in the plan, Farmers Lane to go through up further towards the school. I also know that there is no plan or really movement towards that going in. I just believe that. I know that. I've heard that through many sources. Now, I'm not an official, so everything I'm saying comes out of my own mind. I understand that. But this project is unique in comparison to the earlier project that was proposed. That there are surrounding developments that are going in around that neighborhood, around that parcel. And that parcel is kind of a good example of why this one is because...
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Douglas, I have to stop you, but I'll make sure your concerns get addressed.
I appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next is Leslie Mantufel.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I'm Leslie Mantufel, and I live at 2250 Hibiscus, and that's the houses that are directly across or behind, if you will, the proposal. I have owned my house there since 2006 and have loved being able to live with an open space behind me, but I understand that development occurs, and while I certainly would love for it to remain the way it is without housing, I want to express my gratitude and my thanks to Mr. Natoli for being very generous in his time, his willingness to talk to the neighbors, to take a look at the project, the design of the houses that were going to be put in there. And he's been very responsive. He's been very accessible. And so with that caveat, saying while I would like there not to be any houses, I certainly am supportive of this particular project. The issue that remains, however, for me happens to be the construction hours. And Mr. Natoli began the discussion in terms of during the weekdays, starting at 8 o'clock, and it sounds like the knockoff time would be 7. I also would request that there not be Saturday hours. And that is based upon the other subdivisions and developments that have been around our particular area. I've gone back and looked at a number of resolutions that were passed by the Planning Commission, and in each of them, and there's 4 that surround our area, and they're not in any particular order. The first happens to be Sonoma Academy, which does not have Saturday hours, and they're still in the process of constructing their location. Kiwanis Springs, which is now fully developed, the conditional use permit did not include Saturday hours. Linwood, which is our subdivision, so Hibiscus is in the Linwood subdivision, that did not have Saturday hours. And then the Kiwanis Town Center, which has yet to be built, and that's just down the street, that also will not have Saturday hours. As a resident, Saturday hours, the construction can be very close to our property. The setbacks are real tight. They're 15, 20 feet. So it's going to be right on top of the neighbors that are right behind it. So I would ask that the conditional use permit exclude any Saturday hours. I am agreeable, and I appreciate Mr. Natoli's willingness to start construction at 8 during the weekdays, but I would ask that the Saturday hours be excluded. And that's all I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And next is Martin Seeger.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the time.
I think you need to get a little closer to the microphone then. Great, thanks.
Good evening.
Okay.
I live at 2244 Hibiscus, which is 20 feet from the proposed project, just across the fence line. It's one house up from my neighbor. I support the project. Mr. Natoli has gone overboard in taking his time and effort to meet with me, to come to my house, to look out the windows, and to talk to me about my concerns. And I'm appreciative of that, and I think his courtesy goes a long way towards making this project work. I think he's gone a long ways in designing the houses and the location that minimize the impact. I've also lived in the neighborhood for more than 10 years. I wish it would stay an open space and not be developed. I understand that may not be the way of the world, but this project, I think, goes a long ways towards making that change bearable. My only concern is the time to start construction. And Mr. Natoli and I have talked about this several times. He's generous with his time on the phone, which I think sets a good basis for ongoing relationship, and perhaps is unlike other developers that we've dealt with before. I think 8 o'clock start is a decent time to start. Some employees show up early, and we hear the sound of diesel engines and backup bells and that kind of thing. I live in a Christofferson home where the bedrooms are on the second story. I look right out at it. I'm 20 feet away from the proposed project, and it would be very intrusive to have earlier start times. I would ask that the commission to insert that condition into the resolution. That gives both Mr. Natoli and myself the ability to enforce it if subcontractors say, no, we're starting at 6:30, we don't care. That gives us some horsepower. The Saturday condition is another matter, and I know that Mr. Natoli is reluctant to agree to that, but I believe that the Saturday construction would be difficult. I've been in this community for 35 years, and I've been before this commission 3 times in all that time within the last year. And the last 2 times were with Sonoma Academy. And I raised the same concerns with Sonoma Academy's work, which is more than 200 yards up the hill and away. This is 20 feet away. And if 200 yards meant no Saturday work because of the impact, 20 feet is certainly going to make an impact. So having thanked Mr. Natoli publicly and privately for his courtesy and his cooperation, I would ask the commission to impose the same condition that it has in every other subdivision and development, no Saturday work. If something happened, if the discovery of an underground storage tank or a 50-year storm came up, I'd be more than happy to work with him about it. He's created a lot of goodwill. And if it needed a Saturday or 2 to do work, that's fine. But as a blanket condition, I would be opposed to that. And I'd ask you to limit the work accordingly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't have any other cards on this item. Anybody else? Come on down. You can go up there too. And give us your name, please.
Okay. My name is Esther Penn, E-S-T-H-E-R, last name Penn, P-E-N-N. And I also live on Hibiscus Drive at 2232. And I just would like to further the comments on the construction hours. We have lived with Sonoma Academy construction for the last year. I don't know when it will end, but it has definitely been intrusive in terms of the noise. So I would third the suggestion and request to have the hours start at 8 a.m. And I would also add if they could end by 6 p.m., that would be more ideal. And I would also third the comment about the no Saturday construction hours.
Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Okay, not seeing anyone else. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And ask Mr. Natoli to come back down and address the hours concern if he can, or maybe Mr. Rose.
I may be able to
Okay.
clarify it. I just spoke to Mr. Natoli. He's okay with prohibiting Saturday construction.
Wow, very generous. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think this one's more for staff. So if that blanket no work on Saturday is in place, if by chance there was some kind of an emergency condition or something out of our current expectation now that might warrant work on Saturday, is there a process for that at the staff level to request a waiver? Or I wouldn't want to put it in place and then have based the comment from one of the neighbors, hey, that's fine with me if something comes up. Well, it doesn't work that way. if we put a requirement in place, that requirement's in place. So,
Sure. I appreciate that sentiment. Maybe you can give staff a few minutes while there's some discussion, and we can see if we can craft a condition if one is possible.
Before we go to our discussion, I want to have Ms. Nicholson come up and address Mr. Dantis's concerns too. So we can wait a second, or she can do that now, or however you want to do that. Okay.
So specifically, or I can talk a little bit about the wildlife. There was a biological assessment conducted for the site. The CEQA exemption does not require that there be no wildlife that utilizes the site, but it does say that the site cannot serve as habitat for any species that are listed as rare, threatened, or endangered. And the biologist did not find that this site would be suitable for any species classified as such. So that's how that exemption was utilized, and that was the documentation that was relied on in addition to the EIR that was done for the general plan and the city's geographic information system, which identifies the location of those species as well. So it's not to say that the site doesn't have any wildlife on it. Just wanted to clear that up. And then there was a question about,
Generally, if you could describe kind of what happened, because when he moved in, he was given the impression that there was going to be no development, and explain a little bit about how annexation occurs. And you did give us some information in email. There is other construction or other development being proposed around there. So if you could just kind of give him a picture of how that happened and what to expect now.
yes, so I did do some research and found out that the city approved what's called a pre-zoning for the site back in 2008, and so that's what allows for the future annexation into the city boundaries. I wasn't able to identify what the Sonoma County General Plan land use designation was at the time that he purchased his property. I couldn't find that documentation, I didn't have quite enough time to do that research. So I'm not sure what assumptions or what documentation the realtor was relying on at the time where the property was called open space or something that would be preserved and remain. The city does have established land use designations for all properties that are within the urban growth boundary. And so this property was designated for low-density residential development under the city's general plan at the time of the pre-zoning and also in 2012. And so it sounds like it was, or I believe I read that it was, based on county records, it was formally annexed into the city in the year 2015. But there's no public, I'm not aware of LAFCO's public process in noticing when they do annexations. The city does public noticing for pre-zoning, and that would have occurred in 2008 prior to this property being purchased. And I, again, was not able to connect with a representative at LAFCO to find out exactly what their notification process is, if any, when they go through the formal annexation process. But my understanding is that I know for larger annexations, they do have some sort of notification, but again, because LAFCO is a separate agency from the city, I don't know the details of that process.
Okay. And then I know I was curious when I drove out there, that looked like there was opportunity that we've either already approved some developments and that some might be likely to be coming our way. Can you maybe give us a heads up about that, and so that Mr. Donis is aware of what else might be coming along?
Sure. So there is a project, and let me pull up an aerial photograph here. This is kind of a larger scale here, but this site right here is currently undeveloped, this orange color. But as you can see, there's a bunch of boxes on here, and it's a recorded condominium map. I am not aware of any construction schedule for this, but it is an approved recorded map, and the entitlements are still valid, so they could come in and, as long as they get all their grading and building permits, could construct this project. It's currently approved. There is another project that is actually in for entitlement review right now on this site here.
On Linwood? Yeah, I can see that.
So that's to the north here, and I'd have to look at my notes to see. I'm not sure exactly how many units that is, but that's currently being processed. I'm not the planner for that project, but I recently learned about it, and I need to look at my notes because I know there's one other one, or it may have just been the discussion of Farmers Lane, which could eventually come through here as well.
Right, okay.
So,
great, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions of staff, and is staff ready to give us Mr. Rumble comes back?
So, Mr. Toll.
Let's do this and then we'll ask a question.
Okay. Wait till he comes back.
Well, go ahead and ask your question, because then we'll get him back here.
Yeah, just checking an assumption. So if we've got a plan for Farmers Lane going through sometime in the future, is that going to be kind of the urban growth boundary, like county on the east side and city on the west in this area?
So this is currently pink-line-ish on the urban growth boundary.
I can't see the pink.
Oh.
So Ms. Nicholson is referencing a pink line, and I'm colorblind, so I do not see a pink line on that map.
Right here.
Okay, so that is the urban growth boundary right there.
Okay.
Does that answer the question? Okay, all right.
Okay.
And in response to Commissioner Rumble's question, Mr. Natoli is quite generous tonight. So in response to your generous suggestion, he said that he does not anticipate a need to be on the site on Saturdays. So he is okay with a complete prohibition for Saturday activity.
Okay, great. So any other questions of staff or the applicant before we begin our discussion? Not seeing any. Okay, so we need to start with the conditional use permit and end with the hillside development permit.
Okay.
So somebody ready to move the conditional use permit?
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a small lot subdivision conditional use permit for the terraces at Mount Taylor subdivision located at 2853 Linwood Avenue, assessors parcel numbers 044-200-017 and 044-200-018, file number CUP 16-069, and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. And as we do our discussion, let's discuss the project in its entirety, and I'll figure out where we stick changes if we need to. Certainly, for the conditional use permit, that's our place to discuss the potential friendly amendment to change the hours of construction. Commissioner Duggan, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. I think it's an attractive project. I appreciate the mix of single-story and two-story homes. I appreciate Mr. Natoli's accessibility and working with the neighbors and trying to answer all of his concerns, answer all of their concerns. I'm a little bit mixed on the idea of limiting the construction hours. I know in this area we've had several projects that have come through and without Saturday construction hours, but I think citywide we typically don't disallow Saturday construction hours, so I don't want to give people the impression that no work on Saturdays is going to happen everywhere. But in this case, I would be okay if we wanted to amend it because everybody's agreeable to no work on Saturday. Otherwise, I'm in support of the project and I can make all the findings.
Okay. Commissioner Rummel?
I'm supportive of the project in total. I think that, it's too bad sort of an impression of preserved open space is, maybe incorrect over the long term, however it happened, and it's really unfortunate. I do think it's an attractive project, despite that, and very appreciative of the concessions or the willingness, depending on how we vote here, willingness to amend the hours and support that friendly amendment. It does appear that some neighbors feel like they've been not engaged in the spirit of that. I'd certainly encourage the applicant to continue to reach out and be available to the neighbors of the project, and I wish you the best of luck.
Commissioner Peterson?
I'm also supportive of the entire project. I appreciate the split of opinion between the neighbors on sort of the issues with the notice and development of the project overall. I do appreciate the applicant's willingness to work with the neighbors with regard to the Saturday construction issue. And then sort of going forward, again, because neighbor buy-in, involvement with this process is so important with developments like this. If there are any gaps in the noticing procedure, if the mailers are not distinct enough, anything like that, I'd be happy to speak with staff, take any steps we may need to sort of get that part of it more thoroughly addressed going into these projects at the beginning. But overall, I appreciate the project. I appreciate the applicant's willingness to work with the neighbors and would make all necessary findings to support this project.
Commissioner Weeks?
I am also supportive of the project. I appreciate that you're at the higher end of the density, as I said in the first item we had, as well as having for 1- and 2-story houses. And also that you're willing to work around the construction hours. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also in support of the project in totality. It's a beautiful area because it was so hard to find. I got a chance to drive around many of your streets, and what a beautiful area. And I really believe that this project it's in keeping with the beauty of that area. And I too feel concerned that you did not get the information that you needed to not anticipate what was about to happen around you. But there's a lot that's going to happen around, and there will be notices and opportunity to speak on those things as they come forward. So yeah, I think this is a really good infill project, and I definitely appreciate the applicant's willingness to work with the construction hours. like you, I'm a little worried. I don't want to be setting too many precedents, but I have a feeling not that many developers are going to be that malleable if the Saturdays are really, really necessary. Because we need to get these units on the ground. We need to get them built. So I definitely appreciate your willingness to do that, and I certainly wouldn't try to change it when you've cooperatively come to that agreement. So are you making a friendly amendment with regard to the construction hours?
Is it okay if I make the friendly amendment? If I move the resolution?
Either someone else can make a friendly amendment, or you could revise your motion, and the seconder would have to affirm that.
Okay. Can I revise my motion to include construction hours, weekdays 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. and no construction hours on Saturdays?
I second that.
Okay. So we have the revised resolution for the conditional use permit made by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble, and your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Vice Chair Edmondson abstaining, and Commissioner Gronica being absent. And so with that, we move on to the tentative map.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving the terraces at Mount Taylor tentative map located at 2853 Linwood Avenue, assessors parcel numbers 044-200-017 and 044-200-018, file number MHA 16-004, and waive further reading.
Second.
And the tentative map resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. Any other discussion pertinent to the tentative map? Good. Your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Vice Chair Edmondson abstaining, and Commissioner Gronica being absent. And last,
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa approving a hillside development permit for the terraces at Mount Taylor located at 2853 Linwood Avenue, assessors parcel numbers 044-200-017 and 044-200-018, file number HDP 17-004, and waive further reading.
Second.
okay, and the hillside development permit was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Commissioner Rumble. And any other discussion on that? Not seeing any. Your votes, please. And that passes with 5 ayes, Vice Chair Edmondson abstaining, and Commissioner Gronica being absent. And that concludes this item and concludes our business for this evening. So we'll adjourn to our, I think it's August 24th meeting. So.